Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Playmore69, aka Michael, and this is the All in All Podcast, episode 4. Welcome back, everyone, to the podcast. I have a pretty interesting episode today. This is probably one of my most anticipated episodes to date, and obviously, from what you can tell from the title, this is titled My Rules of Life. So, this podcast will be going very heavily into kind of my philosophy and kind of how I live my life and mainly my rules of life. But obviously, I will be explaining each one of those rules. Now, this episode is inspired by Dr. Jordan Peterson. If you don't know who Dr. Jordan Peterson is, he is a psychologist who taught at the University of Toronto and now is a full-time YouTuber slash podcaster. I think he got really big in 2017 to 2018. I think he's kind of faded off a little bit now, at least from the public eye. But he is a pretty, I guess, interesting figure to a lot of people. If you ask, a wide range of people, they'll give you a lot of different answers about him. I don't think there's a cohesive or just a general answer about Jordan Peterson. I look at him as a self-help kind of author with his books, his Rules of Life books. But if you were to ask I guess, more of a political person about him, I think that they would either call him a conservative or a far right-winger, which I don't fully agree with. At least looking at his politics, he definitely does have some political takes that do lean conservative, but I'm more interested in the self-help side of him when it comes to actually trying to help people. I've read the 12 Rules of Life, and I've also read Beyond Order, which is another 12 Rules of Life, and they both do not seem like political books whatsoever. Yes, there can be some conservative undertones to them, but I think there can also be some liberal undertones to them as well. So I don't really understand that, I guess, kind of criticism about Jordan Peterson being like this political figure. He might have some political takes, but I mean, if you look at his biggest work that he has contributed, it has been his self-help books with his Rules of Life. So this is what this is inspired by. I guess a full disclosure is that, I am a fan of Jordan Peterson, but I wouldn't say like I agree with everything he says. I think that people on the internet have a weird definition of being a fan of someone. Just because I'm a fan of someone doesn't mean I agree with everything they say. And as for Jordan Peterson, as well, his self-help when it comes to his books or his lectures are absolutely amazing, and I think they get a lot of good reception on them, but I don't think many people actually listen to Jordan Peterson for his politics or even look at him as a political figure, at least in my opinion. From everything I've seen, I think that most people on the internet that I've seen look at him as a self-help author, which that's what I've seen him as his entire career, at least from what I've known him. I think I've known about Jordan Peterson now for about 4 years, and yeah, that's just how I've seen him, about his Rules of Life, his self-help, and yeah. Anyways, getting into this episode of My Rules of Life, this is obviously inspired by Jordan Peterson. So when it comes to My Rules of Life, I have a lot more that I want to share, but for now, for this episode, I only want to do 10 because I realized explaining each one of them is going to take quite a while. I'm going to try to consolidate it and try not to go on and on about just one rule, but I believe they all have importance, and I want to give them their due diligence and make sure I explain every single one of them as best as I can, because I don't want to misrepresent a rule or have people confused. So before I start, I just wanted to let everyone know that I will be doing 10, and all 10 of them will be in the description down below, word for word. But I recommend that if you want to get full context for every single rule, that you do listen to the entirety of the podcast. I don't want to, go on for no 2 hours or anything, but when I actually kind of started explaining these rules out as kind of practice throughout the week, it did go on for quite a while, but I will try to at least explain them enough, but I definitely don't want to over explain them. So there will be 10, and I think I will be doing another podcast in the future of my next 10, because there's definitely not only 10 rules of my life. I think there's a lot more. At least for Jordan Peterson, I remember when he wrote his rules of life, it was actually a Quora.com post that he responded to of like, what are your rules of life? And I think he wrote a total of 42 of them. And he's obviously published 2 books that each had 12 rules of life, the ones that he wrote originally. So if you just do simple math, that would be 24 and 42. So he still has 18 rules that he hasn't published. So he could easily publish another 12 rules and then still have 6 left over unpublished, or he could come up with another 6 and then post or publish another book. So who knows at that point, but at least with Jordan Peterson's, he had 42. I'm only going to be doing 10 this episode, but I definitely will do another 10 in the future. I don't know how long in the future. It does take a while to actually write these down. I think the first 10 were a lot easier than the next 10 will be, because these were pretty basic rules. And I started this document actually, it was, let me see. Yeah, it was right when I ended my MBA, when I completed it. And now it's been about a month and a half. So it's took me about a month and a half to write these rules and get some notes down in my document so I can explain each one of them at least to a good extent, so a majority of people will understand. Anyways, enough rambling on. Let's finally get into the episode. My rules of life, and these are my first 10. So rule 1 is respect everyone on an individual level, even if you disagree with them. Now, that's a very basic rule that I think most people understand, but I don't think most people follow. So just to do some explaining with this rule is we first need to break it down of the individual level. So what does that exactly mean, or what do I define that as? I define that as like an individual level of just a person. You strip away their beliefs and who they are and what they've done, but you just look at them in a vacuum as a person, just as an individual human being. And I think when it comes to, just looking at that person in a vacuum as an individual human being, that they deserve respect. And that's why whenever I meet someone new, I always give them respect. I just think that that is one of the easiest things to do and one of the best things to do in life. And I think, when you give someone respect, when you start out meeting them, or if you've known them for a while, whatever, I think it just sets the tone correctly when it comes to a conversation you're trying to have or any sort of interaction you're trying to have with that person. And I think when respect can be rescinded is obviously, let's say if you find out that that person has done an unethical action that you do not approve of, well then obviously they don't deserve your respect anymore. So this doesn't mean respect every single person out there, because you could meet someone and then find out that, they're a serial baby murderer. Well, you're probably not going to respect the serial baby murderer, but I think you will respect the person even if you disagree with, let's say, if they just believed in different political policies than you, that could be something. So obviously, I think you can easily respect that person, but you could disagree with them. So that's where the last part comes in, is even if you disagree with them, you can still respect them. But if they've done something, totally out of your ethical system or moral system, well, then I don't think they deserve respect after that. But that's just how I look at it. I have some notes written down for this rule as well that I will read off now. I have followed this rule throughout my life when it comes to others' beliefs because we all grow up differently. What's right or wrong are different to a wide range of people, and even if we don't understand it, doesn't mean we can't respect it. This is within reason, of course. I believe individuals shouldn't respect others or their beliefs when it comes to infringing on others' rights. So, in this, basically, I'm saying that, what's right or wrong is obviously different to a wide range of people, but when it comes to them infringing on the rights of others, that's when I don't think respect should be given. And I think this is a very simple rule, obviously, respecting everyone on an individual level, even if you disagree with them. I think this is something that should have been taught to most people, but again, this is something that, I've tried to follow my entire life, and I hope that I can continue to follow throughout my life. So that was pretty much a quick one. I think that I didn't really have to do much explaining because it is quite simple, and there's not a lot of nuance to it. But again, I hope my explanation was clear with that one. Anyways, on to number 2. This one, I guess, is quite simple, but I'll have to do a little bit of explaining to it. So this one is always have a purpose or be searching for one in life. And this one, at least, is probably one of the most important to me because I believe to have a fulfilling life or a life that does have happiness, I think you do need a purpose. Now, I will obviously disclose I'm not some sort of medical professional, but if there's one thing I do know about depression and getting out of depression, it's finding a purpose in life and sticking to that purpose. And obviously that is easier said than done when it actually comes to finding a purpose in life that, ultimately fulfills you. But I don't think anyone can find your purpose for you in life. I think that's up to you as an individual in your life. At least it was for me. I think your purpose does change over time as well. When it actually, well, at least mine has. I think my first true purpose in life was obviously, my first job and working. I think one of my recent most purposes that I have, I think, completed, at least in my mind, has been my education in college. I think after getting my MBA, I have finally fulfilled my education enough that I feel comfortable with that purpose being fulfilled. And I think I'm now looking for, the next purpose, which I think that next purpose is actually the podcast and getting back into content creation on YouTube. So my purpose has constantly changed. And I guess I could go back even farther in my life and say one of my first purposes was actually being a content creator on YouTube. And in the early stages of my YouTube channel back in 2013 to 2015, actually uploading Call of Duty commentary. That was probably one of my first purposes in life that I truly had a lot of fulfillment and a lot of happiness from. And I guess I'll talk a little bit about my depression since it kind of connects to this rule. That's kind of why I wrote this rule, and this was obviously the second one I ever wrote. And yeah, just as a disclosure, these rules are in no specific order to which is most important to which is least important. I think that they are all important in their own way, but this rule obviously came out the second one I wrote it, and that's really to do with my depression and how I dealt with it as a teenager, because that's obviously when I experienced it. So looking back on my teenage years, and it really did start right after my YouTube channel got hacked. So for those of you who don't know and haven't seen the All in All podcast episode 1 is where I'd actually explain my YouTube channel getting compromised and hacked and all my videos being deleted, and then, 2.5 years of hard work going to waste. But regardless, basically, I was a Call of Duty commentator YouTuber, and I did it from 2013 to 2015, and then my YouTube channel got compromised and all my videos were deleted. Now, a lot of things changed at that point for me. Not only was my YouTube channel gone and all my videos gone, I basically quit gaming after that. And you would think that why would your depression start from quitting gaming? Isn't that a good thing? Not only that, I also sold my PS4 at the time and all my video games with it, and actually bought a laptop and started focusing on school a lot more. So you would think that, I would be even happier because I would be doing the right thing. And looking back at it, it's like, yeah, I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't happy for some reason, which is quite interesting. And I had to think about that for a while. I was doing the quote unquote right things by focusing on school and not gaming, but I wasn't happy and I was kind of depressed at the time. And also, even more good things started happening when I was 15. I actually started having time to go outside, and I actually had a workout routine, and I actually started eating right and stopped being such a gamer. But yet I was still not happy. And I think it goes back to the role of I didn't have a purpose in life anymore, and I wasn't searching for a purpose in life. And that was my problem, is that I, looking back at it, probably should have made school my purpose, and then I probably would have done much better and maybe got accepted into a university. But, that didn't happen. Didn't get no full ride scholarship, didn't get accepted into a university. But I'm kind of glad I didn't, because now I'm done with college and I'm only 21. So it's actually a net positive. But in that time, before getting my first job and quitting gaming, in that time, I did not have a purpose and I wasn't searching for one. And for those 2 to 3 years, I was very depressed at that time and I didn't know what to do. And, I wasn't suicidal or anything, like, at all. I never actually had those thoughts. It was just like I had this void in me I couldn't fill of what to do. I would just go to school, do my work, come home. I would do my workout. I'd be eating right. I did a lot of the good things, but for some reason in that time, I didn't have a purpose and I wasn't searching for one. And it truly did impact me a lot. And that's why this rule was obviously the second one I written, and it is quite an important rule. Always have a purpose in your life or be searching for one. All right, on to rule 3. So just as a little bit of a preference before rule 3, I might get a little bit of pushback on this rule, but I can explain it to the best of my ability and why I see it as very important. So rule 3 is stop viewing pornography. Now, I don't know what kind of generation I live in. I'm talking about the Gen Z generation here, and I guess millennials to an extent, is that I think we live in this kind of, at least on the internet, this kind of generation of degeneracy, is that degeneracy is looked at as some sort of positive, when I guess it can be looked at as pleasure, but I don't know why it's looked at as so, like, positive. And that's something that's kind of puzzled me for a while. It's socially acceptable to be kind of like a degenerate when it comes to, like, viewing porn or whatever that might be. And I guess I've never really agreed with that, but I've never been able to really, I guess, define it in my head of why that is looked at in my generation or the millennial generation as some sort of positive. Anyways, why I created this as a rule was basically a lot for myself, but for a lot of the young people out there. I think as a young developing person, whoever you might be out there, I don't think watching porn is good in your developmental years. And I will explain a little bit of my anecdotal experience, kind of what that kind of entailed for me throughout my life and why I kind of stopped. I might watch porn once a month now, but even then, I've kind of turned it off in my head as, even entertaining. I don't watch it really anymore. It's been about a year where, I haven't watched it in a kind of like weekly fashion or whatever. A couple years ago it was daily, but then it turned to weekly, and now it's like maybe once a month. Oh, and also I guess I should mention this. I'm not some sort of like no fapper or anything like that, or a person against masturbation, like some sort of like religious, over religious person, or someone a part of the no fap community. I'm definitely not for that. I'm just saying that porn, I think, causes damage to a developing mind. I think it puts ideas in the developing mind's head that maybe shouldn't be there. Um, at least with me, the one that I was able to notice and catch on to as I became an adult, I remember, was when I started going to community college. I remember seeing the girls in community college, and I remember not really finding them attractive. And I was kind of puzzled by this because I thought, like, oh, if I go to college, I'll find people attractive. And, looking at them back objectively, I probably should have found them attractive, but I didn't. And, that was quite odd for me because I looked at myself and I was like, okay, I'm an 18, 19-year-old male. I probably should be attracted to these women. Um, I would think so, but maybe watching porn every day is the problem. I tried to think, what am I doing wrong in my life? Okay, I'm doing the right things as I'm obviously working out, eating right, I'm getting normal sleep, everything else seems right. Um, what if it's the porn? So I asked myself that question and I thought, all right, well, maybe it's time to try to cut that out. I've heard that it's been bad for a while, and I've kind of just, I think, brushed it off. And I think that's what a lot of people do when they hear the conversation about porn, is that they kind of just brush it off and say, like, oh, well, I don't think like that. Well, you might not think that porn has a negative effect on your mind, but you don't know what it is doing subconsciously in your mind. And I think I finally realized that subconsciously is that it was implanting these ideas in my head that women are supposed to look a certain way, be these 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 women, which in most cases in everyday life, you are not going to see those women. And even if you do see those women, you're most likely not going to be with them. Let's be honest here. So I think that's what really kind of turned me away from porn. That's when I kind of started only watching it weekly at that point. And pretty much now for the past year, I've only been watching it about once a month. And even now, it's not that pleasurable to me anymore. I think for me, really ever since I've been weaning myself off of it, it's not been that pleasurable to me anymore. And, I could probably go, I don't want to say the rest of my life without it, but I would say a majority of my life without it. I just don't see it as a, you know, positive thing anymore whatsoever. But I think it has had good effects not watching it. I actually find women attractive now. Like going out in everyday life, I can actually see women as attractive, which is great. I think that's an improvement in itself. And I think it's kind of, I don't want to say repairing the damage that caused, but I will say I think it is. I don't think it's causing any more damage, which is great. And because I really thought about it when it came to like my development or just anyone's development, that, your brain is still building and maturing until age 25. So if you just think about it, that, until age 25, your brain is constantly developing. So if I continue to watch porn daily until I was 25, well, what kind of effects would it had on me then? Maybe then I wouldn't be able to change anything, but at least now I caught it at, around 20. So for the next 5 years, hopefully I will be kind of repairing the damage that has done in, the years of my development as a teenager, but hopefully as an adult, I can repair those damages. And I don't know the extent of the damages. I just know that I'm a person who has never been in a relationship before. And that's really to do with my lack of confidence when talking to the opposite sex. But I think there was also some subconscious kind of problems there of having this idea in my head that women are supposed to be super attractive. And I think that also was a contributing factor to not being in a relationship for me. But again, I think this is an important rule. Stop viewing pornography. I don't think that should be that controversial, but at least looking at the younger generation that I'm in now, that might be somewhat controversial. And on to the fourth rule. So the fourth rule, I think, is something I think most people can agree on, but I don't really know. Anyways, rule 4 is money and success don't equal happiness. So this rule is really self-explanatory. No amount of money you can get or achieve or have can ever basically give you true happiness. And I don't think any amount of success you achieve or have will give you happiness. And I think this rule is just something I wrote down to give myself a reminder that it's not about how much money you have in your bank account or what position you achieve at a job. It's the internal feeling you have in yourself. That's what happiness is. Happiness is that it comes within. I don't think it comes from these external factors like money and success. And I've written down a couple notes when it comes to that. So I remember when I was 16 and I saved up my first $1,000. And, just to preface this, I grew up very poor, grew up in a trailer park. And that $1,000 meant a lot to me. It was quite a lot of money. But I felt like I was quite successful at 16 years of age growing up in a trailer park. But that $1,000 really didn't mean happiness for me. And then I remember at 19, I achieved my first $10,000. That's a lot of money, I think, for any 19-year-old, at least if you're not like completely rich. And I achieved that all on my own by working and investing and doing the right thing. And again, I felt like I was quite successful, but I didn't feel happiness from that. And again, I think one note I wrote in here was that, I think you can be happy if your fundamental needs are met, like eating, sleeping, showering, having a place to live, those fundamental needs that you have. I think if you have those, anything else is just extra. I know it sounds very minimalist, but that's personally what I believe when it comes to happiness. Like if you have your basic fundamentals met, I think you can be happy. But this is just my sort of ideology on this and so sort of my experience on this. And there's really not much to say about this rule. Money and success don't equal happiness. I think different people find that out at different times. For some people, it'll take a lot longer in their life to figure that out. For me, I think I figured that out at like 19, that, when I saw that $10,000 in my bank account, I was like, if I had 100,000 right now, I probably wouldn't be happy. And if I had $1 million right now, I wouldn't be happy. That's just a number in a bank account. It can buy me things for fun and can make me happy at that time, but that's not the happiness within. So again, money and success don't equal happiness. Pretty basic rule there. All right, rule 5. This one might be a little bit harder to understand unless you take it more literally, but this one is definitely an important one to remember and hopefully follow throughout your life, is help yourself before you try to help others. This rule, I think, is part of Jordan Peterson's rules, actually. I think this is one of his, or at least it was worded a little bit different. But this rule, I've learned, at least in my life, when it comes to you have to take care of your own stuff before you take care of other people. And that's just a basic fact of life. I know that we want to be generous in our lives, but we have to take care of our basic fundamental needs. And I think that that's what this rule is. I don't want people to misconstrue this rule of like, I don't have $1 million house or whatever like that, and I don't have, the $100,000 car, so therefore I can't help anyone. No, I'm saying that you have to meet your basic fundamental needs in life, so then you can help others. And I give an example here in my notes that I hope will at least put this into context better. So imagine you were on an airplane, okay? And you have your kid next to you flying with you in the airplane. If the airplane goes through some sort of malfunction or descends rapidly or might crash or has to do an emergency landing, usually the oxygen mask is going to fall down or fall right in front of you. Kids have a lot of problems putting it on, but it is highly recommended that you put it on yourself before you try to put it on anyone else, even if that someone else is your kid. Because if you don't help yourself, you could actually die before putting it on your kid. And that's when, obviously a basic fundamental need of yourself is breathing. If you can't breathe, then you will die, so therefore you can't help your kid. And I think I said at the very end of the notes that if you die, all of that generosity to help others dies too. So if you're not taking care of your basic fundamental needs, you can't help anyone. Because if you die, then all of that time and all of that effort of helping people that could have happened in the future won't happen. So, and I've also looked at a couple of studies when it comes to people doing this. Will they help themselves first versus helping others? It is quite interesting to look at. I definitely recommend that. But I don't think it's selfish to take care of one's basic needs like oxygen and breathing. So this is a very basic rule. Take care of yourself before taking care of others, at least when it comes to your basic fundamental needs. So this leads us into number 6, and number 6 is, I think, a rule or philosophy that Jordan Peterson has echoed multiple times. I think even word for word, or at least maybe it was a couple different words, but this really is rule 6 is take on more responsibility because it'll make you a better person, but not necessarily happier. So this rule, I think, is less understood when it comes to the younger you are in life, because I think that the younger you are, the less likely you are to value responsibility or see the value in having responsibility and that fulfillment that comes from it. Because at least thinking back to when I was young, I did not really put a lot of value in responsibility as I do now. Now, looking at responsibility, I know that it builds me to a better person, and it definitely has been able to do that for me. Going to college, putting in the time and the effort, and having that big responsibility that I need to take care of my college work and all of the classes and writing essays and doing assignments. That was a lot of responsibility. especially because I was able to condense it faster than most people usually do in college. So taking on that responsibility really built me into a better person and built my skills up, built my work ethic. It developed me as a better person and it helped me grow through my life. And I think overall with this rule that it does come with the caveat that there's a different level of responsibility for every individual out there. For instance, I think of one of the biggest responsibilities out there is probably to have kids. Obviously, that is not a responsibility that, everyone out there should have or every person out there wants. But there is a different level to it, and it depending on how much responsibility you can take on in your life, I think that is what you're trying to find is the happy medium. And I look at it as a progression, is that, at around 16, at least in the United States, you can start working. And, it's when I got my first job. I think I was around 17. I was 18 when I got my first paycheck job, but 17 when I started doing all oddball jobs to make money. But that's really one of your first responsibilities in life is obviously to hold down a job. Can you do that? And then probably one of your next responsibilities is what you do with your time after high school. Now, this is a big responsibility that you have to figure out. And I think it starts with, a lot of people will either go to college or join the military or try to figure it out on their own. Maybe just get into the workforce and start working as much as they can. So I think that is the next level. And I think the level after that or the level in between is probably living on your own and obviously paying your own bills and worrying about yourself and not having relying on someone to actually pay those for you and obviously living with your parents. And then I think the next one is, can you hold down a consistent long-term relationship? And then if you can do that, then I think probably one of the final steps is probably having the kid. So, that's how the progression, at least in the most basic terms, is how I look at responsibility. And, obviously I'm not ready to have those upper tier responsibilities yet, but maybe I will get there. I think it'll take a couple more years, but at least for me, that's how the most basic level that I look at. And this rule, when it really comes down to it, it's the most basic level of most philosophies of self-help ideologies. But again, I think it's a great rule. Take on more responsibility because it'll make you a better person, but not necessarily happier. I think you get a lot of fulfillment from responsibility. You get a lot of rewards. And I think that is where a lot of happiness can come from. But some responsibility, even though it will feel rewarding, you might not get happiness from it. All right, rule 7. This rule is never become complacent no matter what your situation is in life. So this rule is pretty self-explanatory, but I do have a little bit of explaining to do. So when it comes to our lives and whatever situation we might be in, whether that might be one of the most positive situations we're in or one of the most negative situations we're in, situations constantly change. So, for instance, wherever your place of living is, your work, your vehicle to get to work, all of those are factors. Those factors could change. For instance, you could lose your job tomorrow, your car could break down tomorrow, your place of living could, have problems. There's all of these sorts of things that could be big changes in our lives that could improve our life for the better or could worsen it. So when it comes to this rule is just always be mindful of the changes that come in life and that will come in your life. That change is inevitable, but you have to be ready for life's changes and you have to constantly adapt to those changes. It's a pretty basic rule, but it's something that we always have to be mindful of. And I think it's also something that helped me, at least, having this kind of thought, because I remember having this sort of ideology in my head when I was depressed as a teenager, is that, my situation in life is going to change. And, instead of just moping and doing the wrong things or doing bad things and things that wouldn't really improve my life, I tried to do the right things. I tried to have a workout routine. I tried to eat right. I tried to do less gaming. Tried to focus on school. So then my life would improve to the better while my situation was changing. So I've had this rule for a while in my life, and it's something I still have now. And obviously, even now, I'm still trying to improve in my life wherever I can. There's always room for improvement. So I'm trying to improve for the better and not try to jeopardize my future by doing bad things that when a situation does happen, it'll only worsen my life and I won't have any sort of backup plan, or I wouldn't be progressing my life. I don't want to be stagnant because if you are stagnant in your life and something happens, well, most likely, if it is a negative thing, well, things are only going to get a lot worse. So, if you're constantly improving in your life and then a change does happen, it should be for the better if you're constantly moving in your life in a positive way. All right, rule 8. This one is judge individuals on their actions, not their beliefs. I wish more people in the world would follow this one. Sadly, that is not the case, but this is one that I try to follow to a T in my life whenever I can. The reason I follow this rule, it should be pretty obvious for those of you who understand it, but the reason I follow this rule is if I was to judge individuals on their beliefs, so for instance, if someone was X religion, that's pretty easy to understand, then if I judge that person because they are X religion, well, that means I'm going to judge everyone under that religion. Therefore, I'm not going to give everyone a part of that religion a, even chance in my head, because the only thing I'm going to do is already box them up into this sort of like preconceived judgment I'm having on people, which can be very negative. Just to give another example, if I had a bad interaction, which I have, I actually got robbed at gunpoint twice, both by black male individuals. If I was to have the preconceived judgment that all black male individuals are robbers, well, that's probably a very bad judgment to have. But if they do not have those actions, well, why would I judge them? So that's really where this kind of basic rule comes in. I mean, these all really are basic, but this one is probably a lot harder to follow. It's quite easy to make preconceived judgments on a group of people based on a couple of experiences that you've had with a certain group of people, because we in our heads, we see people that believe this do this way, but it doesn't mean that everyone believes that certain thing does what everyone else does. All right, on to rule 9. This rule is be conscious of your cadence in every conversation. This might be a rule out of left field, I guess. It kind of doesn't make a lot of sense maybe to most people, but I will explain my rationale behind this rule. So the reason I put this rule in is, I guess to put it easily or lightly, that a lot of my family considers me autistic, at least in the way I talk and interact with people, because obviously they've known me the longest and they've always kind of had that same belief. At least the majority of them do. And I guess I have to agree with them because if I was to look at my charisma, it would definitely be quite low. I guess on a 0 to 10 scale, it'd probably be a 1, maybe a 2 on a good day. Um, but I do exhibit autistic behaviors. So when it comes to like my cadence in conversation, I might know what to say, but I might not know how to say it. And I think that is something that is picked up on by most, I guess, quote unquote, normal people that can see those social cues in conversations, because it took me years to pick up social cues. And I think that as we become more and more, I guess, antisocial with the internet and everything, that social cues are harder and harder to pick up. So I think this rule is quite important, at least to the younger generation, because we are more and more antisocial. So I think as, at least when we're young, we're kind of taught what to say in conversations, but we're not told how to say it. So for instance, if someone's passing, you obviously say, oh, sorry for your loss. The lost person will be in my prayers. I send my condolences. But your cadence really matters when you say that. And I think that the more antisocial we are from a younger generation standpoint, this rule could definitely be something to be looked at when it comes to cadence. I'm not saying like, oh, we need to teach cadence or whatever, but I'm just saying to be mindful of your cadence in every conversation, because how you say something and how it comes out is incredibly important to showing the emotion and showing the correct situation at which you are in within the conversation from the individual. And finally, to Rule 10. This is one that I have thought about and contemplated for a while, and I think I finally got it in to good enough words to finally put it into a rule. Now, when it comes to explaining it, there will be a lot of explaining to do, but I will try to keep it short. So, Rule 10, every day, try to experience something new or a little different. This rule, basically, I'm going to get a little bit morbid here, is basically about death. So when we think about death, I think the first question is like, what do we want to do before we die? And I think it's really easy to break it down as we want to have experiences. And we want to have, I think, a variety of experiences. I think that is incredibly important. Because when you're on your deathbed, I don't think you are thinking about, oh, I wish I worked more hours in the office. It's like no one wants that. I doubt anyone on their deathbed has ever said like, oh, I wish I worked more in the office because, I'm already there for 40 to 45 hours a week. I wanted to be there 50 hours a week. No, I don't think anyone is thinking about that. And obviously we need to ask ourselves why, that's the case. And I think that's the case because, if we're already working at our job or in the office or whatever for already an extended period of time, we obviously don't want to work more there, even if it is pleasurable to us. And I think that is because a variety of experiences is more enriching to us on our deathbed. Because when we are on our deathbed, we don't have to ask ourselves the question of, what if I did this? Or what if I tried this? I might have actually liked doing this, and now I will never know because I'm on my deathbed. And I never went out of my way to have different experiences or try different things. This rule is a relatively new rule to me. And I think that really comes down to it because, I have been thinking more about death and what I want to get out of life and what I actually want to experience. And I really came down to the conclusion that I think memories are one of the most valuable things we can have. Because when we are on our deathbeds, which hopefully for all of us it's in the very, very distant future, but when we are there, I think the things that we want to be thinking is our memories. And those are all of what is going to matter at that time. It's not going to be how much money we made or the level of success at our job we reached. I think it's going to be the memories that we had in life that we found most pleasurable, whatever those might be. And I also heard, I think I recently saw this speech or kind of video on YouTube about Dave Chappelle. And I think he had this exact quote that, memories are all that matter to me. And that's what I think I've learned in life. And that's what he's trying to get out of life is the variety of experiences. And I think that's why this rule is at least new to me, because I have started in my life trying to experience new things, going out of my comfort zone, so I don't have to ask myself, what if? And obviously every day I try to experience something new, or at least a little bit different. And I think it's quite a success so far for me. I feel a little bit better, at least starting now, starting at a young age of 21, of being able to experience different things and being mindful of this. Because, I don't know. The truth is, I don't know how much longer I have on this earth, and, I don't think any of us know. So I think it's good, even to start when you're young, is to be thinking about what you want out of life. And I think trying to have that variety of experiences is also something that should be looked at too. So I think that wraps up my 10 rules of life segment. Those were my 10 rules of life so far. Obviously, I am writing more as I go, and in the future, I definitely want to do a my rules of life again, and that'll probably be another 10. I'll probably stick with that. And the truth is, I don't know how many rules I'll write. I could wind up with 50 or 100. But as of now, they do take me a little bit of time to write and actually come up with. Obviously the first 10 are going to be the easiest because they're probably going to be the most basic. And I will try to obviously get out the next 10 because, I already have a couple that I've been working on and writing. But these 10 I think were the most important and the most basic to me so far, and at least the ones that came to me first. And I try to follow them obviously every single day of my life. That's obviously the what they are, my rules of life. And as the podcast is coming to a close, I guess I will talk about the future episodes. At least I have a topic list now going for my future episodes. So for the future, I have a podcast tier list I wanted to do. That'll probably be the first podcast that you'll actually have some visuals on. Obviously, for people who purely listen to the audio form, I will be explaining every single tier, and it'll be a traditional tier list of going from S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier, of all of the podcasts that I have listened to and will rate. Another topic I have is dating. So like dating as a young male. Nowadays, at least with the internet, I know that a lot of young males out there have had a lot of problems, and there's been a lot of studies on that, and that would be a quite heavily researched episode. And the last topic that I have written down is a comedy episode, and this episode or that episode would be all about comedy. So like what is acceptable to joke on nowadays, at least in the cancel culture type of environment we live in, and if comedy is dead or comedy is growing to a different sort of comedy that we don't know in the West yet, but is maybe evolving or just changing. Maybe it's regressing. I don't know, but that I think will be a quite interesting episode. It's just been on my mind recently, obviously. For those of you who haven't seen the Dave Chappelle recent special, I think that really comes to mind when we talk about comedy nowadays and what's acceptable to joke about and what's not acceptable. So I think that's about it for episode 4. Hope everyone enjoyed. I think this was quite an interesting episode of my rules of life, looking into my philosophy and my beliefs. And if you have any comments agreeing or disagreeing with any of the rules, I would definitely love to hear them. But regardless, thank you all for listening to another episode of the All in All podcast. Obviously, this is a weekly podcast. I hope to see you next week. And as always,